All right, moving on, we're going to the balcony. Andrew Siff, Chuck Scarborough's biographer, is right there from NBC. Andrew.
Thank you very much. What an honor to cover Chuck this week. Jano, my question to you, following up on what Marcia asked. With the court action ahead, how committed are you to starting congestion pricing on or about June 15th? For example, if you got some kind of answer from the court, this looks okay, but let's study it for another 120 days, but there's no stay, no order to stop it. What will you do it? Will you start it even if there's, an appeal underway? Give New Yorkers an idea of whether they should plan on actually paying
Andrew,
this
I think what you and I both owe New Yorkers is not to mislead them with, legal hypotheticals that don't exist. The court process has been scheduled to be resolved before we are going to start congestion pricing. We're very confident about the outcome, but actually we don't need to engage in hypotheticals. There's actually a schedule that's going to yield an answer in due time.
All right, let's move right next door to the governor of the Academy, Newton Jones Burkett III from ABC.
That was not as much as Mr. Lieber.
You haven't been watching the coverage, Chris, but go ahead.
Mr. Lieber, you said a moment ago in answering Andrew's question that you're confident that you're going to prevail in the legal action. What makes you so confident?
Well, I think I've said it before many times. We did this 4,000-page environmental assessment, a scale of an environmental review process that had never been completed before, to my knowledge. Not just the number of pages, but the modeling and the analysis, studying every intersection almost all the way to Philadelphia, and doing a public outreach process that had more than 50 public meetings, 25,000 comments in the last hearing phase, 60% positive. So, under federal environmental law, an undertaking of that scale is fully compliant and more than exceeds the standards for a proper federal environmental review. And we're confident that we're going to have the right outcome.
All right, moving on to America's Page 6 newspaper. Nolan Hicks is here from the New York Post. Nolan.
Because that worked out so well last time. Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks.
How did you celebrate in the back room after the vote?
We had the usual tray of OK sandwiches, and we mostly celebrated the folks who I called out at the beginning, who had done so much work to get us to this moment. This was a big day for the MTA. I mean, I understand that we quickly want to move on to talking about hypotheticals and everything else, but today was the day that we voted on the final toll structure. That was what was before us. That's what the legislature told us to do in 2019, was to develop a plan to implement congestion pricing. We did all that work for 5 years that got us to this moment where we approved a toll structure. And you heard from Carl Weisbrod all the thinking and balancing that went into that. So, big moment.
Walk me through for a minute, having this victory occur at the same time. Folks are increasingly worried about riding the trains and increasingly concerned about violence in the trains, and sort of this very stark contrast of finally you have the resources to go build things, but at the same time the system and its place in its civic culture has never sort of been in the jeopardy that it is in recent years.
Well, I don't know if I totally agree with you, but what I said during the meeting is what I'm going to stand by, which is we're not going back. We have much less crime statistically than we did when I was a kid, but there's no question that our riders are uncomfortable right now, and fortunately we have a mayor and a governor who are absolutely committed to subway safety and public safety, and they're taking action, and I'm thrilled by that. But we have to also address the issue of the presence of people who are struggling with mental health to their own detriment, but also to the detriment of the experience of subway riders. And that's why you heard a lot about that Scout program, which we have initiated with the city to get those people indoors. They need to be out of the subway system and indoors.
Serious assaults, felony assaults in the system are up some 250 instances per year over what they were doing pre-pandemic. Why do you think that is? What do you think crime in the subways has gotten more violent?
I'm not a criminologist. I'm interested in just pushing back. So, others are going to have to talk about what we read about in many different papers, which is mental health issues nationally and the way that the pandemic and other factors may have led to this moment. But my riders and the people that you ride with, Nolan, are mostly interested in how to just make it safer, and that's what we're focused on. And that's why I'm thrilled about the
If I
cops.
could just
We
a point of
really got a
clarification,
lot of people
you
here.
seem to suggest that there's a twinning between the mental health crises and the violent crime crisis in the system. Do you view them as interlinked?
In some cases, but and I think we all know that those, some of those instances. But I'm focused on making sure that the system feels safe for the riders, not just that it's statistically safe, but it feels safe. And in fairness, we have acknowledged from the get-go that the presence of people who are struggling with psychosis, who may be acting aggressively in the public space, is part of the subway experience that we all need to address. Do it with compassion, but we need to bring those people indoors. That's what the Scout program's about.
All right, let's go to the Hudson patio over there. Ben Brockfeld from AM New York is standing by. Ben?
Hey, Jano, is this thing on? Okay. So I just wanted to ask, you know, after the plan got approved the first time of many votes to approve in 2019, you know, it took a long time before, you know, the environmental assessment was ready, the feds were approving it, all that stuff. Now that you have this final vote of approval, you know, what's the expected turnaround time from the feds to, you know, ensure that it's within what you said was the scope of the EA? And is there any chance that they could come back and say, no, you got to spend a whole lot more time and take more votes and do more hearings and stuff like that?
I don't anticipate that, Ben. And you know, we're talking about implementation in June, so we fully expect that final box checking to take place well in advance of that.
All right, Evan Simko-Bednarski is here from the New York Daily News. Evan.
Hey, Jenna. Quick question about, you know, if we're confident in a June, you know, rollout, when do we start seeing projects start to come online? You know, we had that map at the last meeting of, you know, all the projects that we are in the pipeline.
Yeah.
A procurement process has been sort of halted across the board on a whole bunch of capital projects. There have been delays. When can New Yorkers start expecting to see, if not shovels in ground, you know, ink on paper in terms of contracts?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've been pretty open about it. We're as soon as we have the litigation resolved, which is the principal risk that that exists, that continues. We will ramp up again the procurement process for all those projects. Many of them were actually advanced in the procurement process. Some of them had taken bids or were on the verge of taking bids. So many of them can be awarded, the contracts can be awarded quickly. But some of the benefits, you know, the priority areas that are represented in that are moving, you know, can and will continue to move forward. The Second Avenue subway, we got the first contract underway, and if once we ramp up the remaining contracts, we don't expect that we would miss a beat, in effect, in that project. New Yorkers are seeing a ton of subway accessibility projects already, and those will continue to go very quickly. The signalization projects that we've talked about, many of them are already underway. So we're not expecting a huge disruption, but obviously we have to wait to award the contracts. Thank you.
All right, let's go to Samantha Liebman right there in the front row from New York 1. Sam?
Janet, there were really no exemptions despite all of the public comments and also, I'm sorry. There were no exemptions despite all of the public comments, and the city was concerned about the yellow cab industry. What was the thought process in not granting at least the yellow cab exemption?
Well, I think that, you know, I don't want to overlook what was done with respect to yellow cab and for our vehicle tolls in this. Originally, it was contemplated they would pay a daily toll like every passenger car driver. And what came out of the EA in the first round of hearings that we did in connection with NEPA was the importance of having it be a per-ride toll that's passed along to the customer. So that was a win for the yellow cab industry and a win for for-hire vehicles. They wanted it structured as a pass-through to the rider. Then we balanced, the TMRB actually balanced the scales and said, the yellow cab industry, in light of its, the difficulties that it has experienced, should have a much lower toll than the for-hire vehicles, who have, to some extent, crowded them out of the market. And as a result, the yellow cab piece of the toll is $1.25, whereas the Uber and Lyft, or the for-hire vehicles, the app-based for-hire vehicles, are $2.50. So they made I'd say the industry made a lot of progress through the process. Obviously, they would have preferred it to be zero, but there was a huge deference given to their unique role in New York and their economic condition.
Do you think it could be reevaluated at some point, depending on the data?
Right now, I mean, we've come to a stopping point, but part of our responsibility is to do an evaluation and a monitoring of traffic and a ton of other issues, and we're going to bring those answers. It's all going to be very open because we are a super open data organization at this point.
All right, if I could just direct you, Jano, to the Zoom equipment where Christopher Robbins is standing by from Hellgate. Chris, good afternoon.
Hi, thanks so much for taking these Zoom questions. I really appreciate it. Two quick things. You talked a lot about how statistics don't matter for riders who still feel unsafe. So more needs to be done, more police need to be in the system. But if the policy isn't primarily being driven by actual numbers, then what specifically is your metric for success? When will the system have enough police presence? And secondly, on congestion pricing, are you concerned that the MTA is going to see a proliferation in fake license plates, ways to avoid the tolls? And do you think the MTA currently has enough tools to stop drivers from doing that?
Well, yeah, the last question is a little bit of a softball, because you know that the MTA and Governor Hochul have proposed that we need more tools to tighten up on toll evasion. We have actually significantly reduced what we call unbillable tolls by improving the computer systems that track license plates and vehicles, and also by improving the identification equipment, make sure we capture both video and otherwise capture the tolls from the vehicle license plates. The one thing that is growing in unbilled is intentional toll evasion by obscuring or defacing a plate. So we do need more tools. Governor Hochul has proposed those in her budget. The two houses of the legislature have pushed back, and you heard from a couple people today that they think it's really important that we do get what we're asking for. It's so unfair, just as people grouse, as they should, when they see, they pay for a subway ride and they see somebody walking through the gate and helping themselves to a free ride. It's even more appalling when people are taking, these huge additional steps to install devices that allow them to fake license plates. As for the question of, what's safe enough, I'm going to let my riders keep telling me. We survey them every month, and we survey them, hundreds of thousands of them a couple times a year. And right now, they're telling us they feel less safe, and they very much want to see more cops in the system. And that is the one thing that improves their feeling of safety. We know that from the statistical history. So we're going to keep supporting the NYPD as they try to, push back against crime and also improve the sense of rider safety.
Sticking with Zoom for a moment, Michelle Caskey is standing by from Bloomberg News. Michelle, good afternoon.
Hello, thank you. And my question is, could we get a little bit more detail on what you need next from the federal government? I understand you're saying USDOT will be looking again at the tolling structure to see if it fits in what they had approved before, but there's also an agreement, if I'm getting this correctly, an agreement that the federal government, New York State, and MTA need to come together and sign off on. Any detail on that?
Not really. I think it's mostly in the EA, Michelle, and that we've always said from the start that if you look back at the EA, that these other last boxes need to be checked, that they were time dependent on us enacting a final tolling structure. That's what we did today. But I view them as ministerial, and I'm real comfortable. So take a look back at the EA if you have questions about that process.
All right, next in the House, we've got Steve Nesson with a PH. WNYC in Gotham is Stephen.
Hello, Chair.
Hi.
I guess this is more of a clarification question on the tweak to the exemptions regarding city vehicles,
Yeah.
and maybe one of the folks can help. But I spoke with people from the mayor's office this week, and they seem to describe a different type of vehicle that would be exempt. They said, like an ACS worker going to investigate a case, a building inspector checking out a complaint, or a city planner going to a work site. None of those folks carry heavy tools or equipment, but the city seems to believe they would be exempt. So is that class also exempt?
I think what we've clarified is that the vehicle, it needs to be integral to the work itself, and we have worked that out with the city. So I'm pretty confident because we went through class by class and agency by agency, and so we've come to an agreement with them, and I'm not, I don't have uncertainty that it's really about the vehicle rather than the purpose of the passenger.
And just to follow up also, what changed with your thinking or the group's thinking on like the Hampton Jitney, for example, getting an exemption, which you seemed dead set against at the last meeting?
Listen, in fairness, the point was the original TMRB proposal said under contract to government. It became clear over time that there were maybe it was unknown to the TMRB at the time, in effect, that there were more private bus operators who are operating service that really has the look and feel of a commuter service, regularly scheduled and open to the public. It's not a charter bus for one particular group for a particular time, and regularly scheduled and open to the public and observing all the rules of public conveyances in terms of how you treat people. And over time, the decision was that those folks, the benefits of having those vehicles be treated as commuter vehicles outweighed the idea of whether they were under contract to a municipality in some way.
All right, let's go back to the mezzanine where Greg Mocker is standing by from Pix 11. Greg.
Hi, Chairman. Talk to me as a rider now. What do you think this means for people, for us standing on the platform, waiting at the bus stop?
Thanks. 90% of folks who come to the Central Business District, 90% of New Yorkers come by transit. And one of the biggest goals of this whole exercise is to finally attack congestion. But the other side of the equation is to invest more in transit. And $15 billion of transit means that we can make more stations ADA accessible with elevators. We can re-signal lines to make them have more capacity and to be more reliable, like the 7 and the L are right now. We can buy zero-emissions buses so the air is cleaner. We can do a lot of things, and we can keep this very old system in decent shape so that it doesn't fall apart like it did back in 2017. We have better service because of the investments we've made. We want to make more like that.
All right, let's move over to Rye Rivard there with the colorful tie from Politico. Rye, good afternoon.
Thank you. The plan changed a bit, but in terms of the money raised, can you offer any refinement or more information on the revenue that's coming in and how certain you are that it'll meet the revenue projections anticipated by the legislature, required by the legislature, and your own capital plan?
We're pretty confident that this plan is going to yield whatever revenue is necessary to support $15 billion in bonds that will pay for $15 billion of capital investment. That's what I can say to you right now. We had the conversations again and again throughout with CFO Kevin Willens, who used to run public finance at Goldman Sachs, and Jay Patel, who's not far behind him in expertise, and we have that confidence.
All right, let's move over to the David Colon from Streets Blog. Rich Davey reminds me your
a lot of people put on ties, so it seems like you recognize a special occasion. Cologne went the extra step, huh?
He's got the shades. Rich Davey wants to remind us that the Knicks are now 13 and a half games behind the Celtics, unfortunately. Welcome, Dave. Good to have you.
Celtics blew a 30-point lead to the Hawks this week. Jano, I wanted to ask something about the specialized government vehicles. Real quick. Were there any vehicles that the MTA said no to? Was that the city was asking for the exemptions for?
I don't say we weren't saying no. It was a discussion. We started with a principle, which is that the TMRB recommended that the vehicle itself should be integral to the performance of public work. And we went through the different types of vehicles at the different agencies and worked out what that meant more specifically. So I wouldn't, it was a successful discussion led in part on the city side by Mira Joshi, the deputy mayor, who's now on our board. So we didn't have to say no. We just went through it and worked it out.
And in terms of what's going on up in Albany, there is the legislation that would pay for expanded bus service before congestion pricing starts. That was a legislative proposal. It wasn't a gubernatorial proposal. Have your intergov people made it clear to the governor's office that it's something that you hope gets in the budget? Do you know what the status is? Is that going to wind up in the budget?
The executive branch has to work out with the legislative branch a lot of issues. The things that are being asked for cost money, and the executive branch is always looking at trying to keep the budget from going out of balance. So what our message is, you guys work it out, but let there be no confusion. We're always happy to increase service. In part, Dave, because with the Queens bus redesign, we are identifying opportunities and an interest in increasing service to the tune of between $10 and $20 million a year. So we like running more service. We're a transit agency, but they got to work it out.
All right, next up is Alfonso Castillo from Long Island. Alfonso.
Hi, Jana. A lot of Long Islanders are not going to be happy about the news about the congestion pricing. It remains exceedingly unpopular on Long Island. Nearly 3/4 of registered voters said they were against it in a poll. Both county executives, the entire congressional delegation.
And yet, 2 out of 3 Long Islanders on the MTA voted for it. So
yes, and one did not, and the only no vote came from a Long Islander. So, are the people who were opponents from Long Island, are they a lost cause? Do you hope that you can win them over once this is in place, and do you think they'll start to see the benefit of it?
Yeah, and that's been the history in other places, is that there is there's increasing concern and anxiety among some people, drivers most of all. As you head into the moment of implementation, and then it becomes accepted, and in London, Stockholm, actually much more popular over time. Listen, our goal is, we always talk about who's being harmed by this, but one of the beneficiaries we hope and expect will be people who have to drive to the CBD for whatever reason, that they will have less traffic, they will spend less time. That's the reason the business community all over the region has supported this, because they're losing billions and billions of dollars having, workers whose time is valuable sit in traffic. So we hope to win folks over as this is implemented.
If I could ask something not quite related, it's been 5 years since those huge overtime numbers that led to investigations and indictments and reforms. Overtime ticked down for a few years and now was up in 2022. And I recently looked at the 23 numbers and they're up again. Anything you could say about whether the MTA remains committed as ever to reining in overtime costs, and any explanation why those numbers have been up?
Yeah, we remain committed as ever to reining in overtime. One of the main ways we do it is to hire. All over the country, transit is having a personnel hiring challenge. We're doing a little better than most of the world, but it's still an issue. And overtime is to a great extent driven by vacancies, where you have to use existing personnel because you don't have, in effect, enough people for a job. But we're paying very, very close attention to it. One of the things that you ought to be mindful of is that running, an extra terminal, the scale of Grand Central Madison, has, challenged us in terms of staffing fully and maintaining full staffing to do all of our operations. That's obviously a special Long Island Railroad challenge.
If I could squeeze in
we got
a yes or no?
We can't really squeeze because we've got somebody waiting from across the river, Larry Higgs from NJ.com. He's on Zoom. Larry, good afternoon.
Thanks for the call from across the river. My question has to do with Governor Murphy's statement that the state will continue to fight and avail itself of every option. How do you think today's approval will bring New Jersey to the table, and are you willing to with Governor Murphy?
Listen, Phil Murphy is a smart and a smart leader. But I have no idea how our action. We're moving forward to implement this because we've complied with every procedure and every law, and we're implementing the law of the state of New York. So I'll leave it to Governor Murphy to decide if he wants to, interfere legally or otherwise.
All right, we're going to move on because, Larry, you were breaking up. There's a connection issue. Let's go to Jose Martinez to close out the proceedings from the city. Jose, good afternoon.
Hi, Jano. Just in recent days, the subway system has experienced a significant number of incidents of people ending up on the tracks. I believe there were at least 4 in the course of 2 days, including the fatality at 125th on the Lexington Avenue line. Is this a spike? Is this an unusual number? Is the MTA seeing anything new on this in terms of people ending up on the tracks and coming into contact with trains? And thank you.
So, Jose, respectfully, I think you ought to differentiate between people who put themselves in harm's way because they want to do harm to themselves, which is the case with the incident, a couple of the incidents you're talking about, or people who put themselves on the track consensually, I guess, as an adventure. What I'm concerned about is riders feeling safe, and that's why we are attacking the mental health problem in the way that we've described, and that's why we are supporting the NYPD as they continue the effort to rein in subway crime and also to make riders feel much safer. Those are the 2 goals we have. I'm not going to associate that, the crime pushback with, people who are doing it to themselves.
And aside from that, whether it's crime or people doing it to themselves, could you speak, please, to the impact on the workforce when this sort of thing happens, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a legit point. That one of the cruelties of this kind of reckless behavior and even the behavior that's self-harm is what it does to others. And a train operator who goes through something like that has a real impact, and I don't want our workers to go through that. I don't want our workers to go through that. I don't want them to be attacked, but I also don't want them to have that traumatic experience. So let's respect the folks who are doing public service and don't put them through that.
All right, thanks, Jano. Thanks, everybody, and good afternoon from Lower Manhattan.